Level 1. The name that would last forever. One day, they will carve your name into stone so deep that 3,000 years cannot erase it. One day, you will build temples so massive that the sky itself seems to bow. One day, emperors will study your wars, poets will speak your name like a prayer, but right now, you are just a boy. The year is 1303 BC. You are born into the most powerful family on earth. Your father is Seti I, Pharaoh of Egypt. Your mother is Queen Tuya. The Nile is flooding outside the palace walls, and the priests say it is a sign. They say the gods themselves are celebrating, but you don't know any of that yet. All you know is the warmth of the palace, the smell of incense, the sound of thousands of servants moving through stone halls built for gods. From the moment you open your eyes, Egypt is watching, and what Egypt is watching for is whether you are worthy. Level 2. The weight of the lotus crown. You are 4 years old when your father first puts a sword in your hand. It is too heavy. You drop it. No one laughs. That would be dangerous, but you see it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the silent question. Every courtier, every general, every priest is already asking, is this boy strong enough? Your father is a warrior king. Seti I has already marched into Syria, crushed the Hittites, and brought home prisoners in chains. His legacy is written in blood and stone. Every morning you wake up inside it. Every evening it presses down on your chest like a monument. At age 6, you begin formal military training. Before sunrise, while Egypt still sleeps, you are already running. Chariot drills, archery, formation tactics. Your instructors show no mercy because your father told them not to. He is not a prince today. Seti reportedly said, he is a soldier. You fall, you bleed, you get up, because in this family there is no other option. But training is one thing. What comes next will be something far more dangerous. Level 3. A boy at the edge of war. You are 10 years old when your father takes you to battle for the first time, not to fight, to watch. But what you see changes something inside you permanently. The screaming, the dust, the chariots tearing across the desert floor like thunder on wheels, men falling, shields splitting, the smell of blood mixing with sand under a merciless Egyptian sun. Most boys your age would look away. You don't. You lean forward, your father notices, and for the first time, he looks at you differently. Not as a child, not as a prince he needs to protect, as something else, a weapon being sharpened. At 14, you are appointed commander of the Egyptian army. A title, yes, but a real one. Real soldiers, real responsibility, real enemies watching from across the borders of empire. At 14, you are already carrying a nation on your back, and the gods are not finished with you yet. Level 4, the apprentice Pharaoh. At age 22, your father makes it official. You become co-regent, co-ruler of Egypt, Pharaoh in all but death. You ride beside Seti I on military campaigns into Libya and Nubia. You watch how he commands, how he moves through a crowd of soldiers and makes them feel invincible just by being there. You study it, you absorb it, you file it away like a weapon for later, but you are not simply copying him. You are becoming something different. Where Seti is measured, you are electric. Where your father speaks with gravity, you speak with fire. Soldiers don't just respect you, they believe in you. And belief in Egypt is more powerful than any army. You begin building. Small projects at first, a temple here, an inscription there, but your name starts appearing on walls across the empire. Subtle at first, then not subtle at all, Egypt is beginning to feel two pharaohs in the room, and then, in 1279 BC, the room belongs to only one. Your father dies, and the throne of the most powerful civilization on earth is yours, but power doesn't come with peace. It comes with enemies already sharpening their blades. Level 5, the empire that would not stay still. You are in your early 20s, you are Pharaoh, and the world immediately tests you. Libyan tribes raid the western delta, Nubian kingdoms push against your southern borders, and in the east, the Hittites, the one empire strong enough to challenge Egypt, are moving. You respond to all of them. Nubia first, you march south and crush the rebellion with a speed that shocks everyone. The campaign takes weeks, not months. You bring prisoners back to Thebes in chains and have the victory carved into the temple walls before the dust has even settled. Then Libya, another campaign, another victory, another inscription. Your scribes are working overtime, but the Hittites are different. The Hittites are not rebels. They are not raiders, they are an empire. They have iron weapons when Egypt still uses bronze. They have war chariots engineered for mass destruction. They control the trade routes through Syria, routes that Egypt needs. Their king, Muatali II, has been watching you, and he has decided that this young pharaoh is inexperienced enough to destroy. He is wrong, but he doesn't know that yet, and neither do you. Not completely, because what is coming will be the most dangerous day of your life. Level 6, the road to Kadesh. It is year 5 of your reign. You march north with 4 divisions of the Egyptian army, 20,000 men, 1,000 chariots, stretched across the Syrian desert like a river of bronze and ambition. Your target, the city of Kadesh, the gateway to Hittite-controlled Syria, take Kadesh, and you control the north, take Kadesh, and the Hittites know your name the way they know the names of their own gods. Intelligence reports reach your tent. Local scouts tell you the Hittites are nowhere near. They've retreated. They're far to the north. Kadesh is practically unguarded. You believe them. You shouldn't. It is a trap, perfectly executed, patiently set. Muwatalli has hidden his entire army, possibly 35,000 soldiers behind the city, and you, moving fast, impatient, certain of your own destiny, are marching your lead division directly into the mouth of it. When the Hittite chariots come, they come from everywhere. Your second division is shredded before they can form a line. Soldiers are running. Officers are screaming. The ground is shaking and the air is full of arrows, and the Egyptian army, the greatest army on earth, is breaking apart, and you are alone, your personal guard scattered, your reinforcements not yet arrived, just you, your chariot, your horses, and 8,000 Hittite warriors closing in from every direction. This is the moment where most men die. Level 7, one against the storm. This is the moment that will define your entire life. There is no army. There is no strategy. There is no plan. There is only you. Ancient records, including your own. Yes, but also Hittite accounts. Confirm what happens next. You charge, alone, into the Hittite lines. Again, and again, and again. Your chariot moving so fast that arrows miss. Your arm drawing and releasing, drawing and releasing. You hit soldiers, you scatter formations, you buy time that should not have been buyable. The texts say you cried out to Ammon. I call to you, my father Ammon. I am alone in the midst of enemies. And then, something shifts. A reserve division, your Ptah division, reaches the battlefield. The tide turns, slowly, violently, inch by inch. By nightfall, both armies are exhausted. Neither has won, neither has been destroyed. Kadesh remains in Hittite hands. But you are alive, and the Hittite lines did not hold the way Muwatalli planned. You return to Egypt and call it a victory anyway. Your scribes write it that way, your sculptors carve it that way. Across every temple wall in Egypt, Abu Simbel, Karnak, Luxor, the story is told in stone. Ramesses II, alone against thousands, chosen by the gods, unconquerable, propaganda, perhaps, but also you did not break, and that is something no one can carve away. The Hittites, however, are not finished with you, and neither is history. Level 8, the builder who shook the earth, the wars slow, the borders hold, and now you do something no pharaoh has ever done at quite this scale. You build, not temples, not monuments, an obsession, Abu Simbel, 2 massive temples carved directly into a mountain cliff in Nubia. The 4 seated statues of you at the entrance are 67 feet tall. Your face, repeated 4 times, gazing out across the desert for eternity, and on the day of your birth and coronation, twice a year, the rising sun reaches through the tunnel and illuminates your face inside the sanctuary, while the statue of the god of darkness sits alone, untouched by light. You built that, intentionally, Karnak, Luxor, the Ramesseum, your own mortuary temple, Pi Ramesses, an entirely new capital city you built from scratch in the Delta. It stretches across 100 square kilometers and sits at the center of your empire. Everywhere Egypt looks, it sees your face, your name, your story carved into the bedrock of civilization. You are not just ruling Egypt, you are fusing yourself into it, making yourself inseparable from the land, the faith, the identity of an entire people. Your reign stretches on. 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. You outlive your generals, your advisors, your wives, your sons. You outlive nearly everyone who ever knew you at the beginning. And in your 60s, something happens that no one expected. Egypt makes peace. Level 9, the treaty and the silence. Year 21 of your reign. Your armies and the Hittites have been locked in proxy wars and border skirmishes for nearly 2 decades since Kadesh. Neither empire can crush the other, both are bleeding. And then a letter arrives from the Hittite king, Hattusili III. A peace proposal you could refuse. You are Ramesses II. You could march north again. You could spend another decade, another generation, fighting over the same desert. But you don't. You sign the Treaty of Kadesh, 1259 BC, the oldest surviving peace treaty in human history, recorded in cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphics on clay tablets. You and Hattusili agree to non-aggression, mutual defense, and the return of political refugees. A copy hangs today in the United Nations building in New York City. You seal it by marrying a Hittite princess. Then another. The world watches 2 empires choose survival over pride. It is perhaps the most mature thing you have ever done, but age is doing something else to you now. Your teeth are failing. Your spine is curved from decades of battle and command. Your hair, what remains, is white. Your children are dying before you, over 100 sons and daughters, and you are watching many of them go first. The Nile keeps flooding. The priests keep burning incense. Egypt keeps turning. But you are no longer the young man who charged alone into 10,000 spears. You are 90 years old, and Egypt has never known a world without you. Level 10. The name, carved into forever, around 1213 BC, Ramesses II dies. He has ruled Egypt for 66 years. 66, most pharaohs ruled for 15, 20. He has built more, conquered more, inscribed his name more times on more surfaces than any ruler in Egyptian history. He has outlived 12 of his own sons who were meant to succeed him. When he dies, an entire civilization genuinely does not know what comes next, because for most people alive in Egypt at that moment, there has never been a pharaoh who was not Ramesses. He is buried in the Valley of the Kings. His mummy is eventually moved to keep it safe from tomb robbers. In 1881, it is found in a cache with other royal mummies, perfectly preserved. His body travels to France in 1974 for conservation treatment, and when his mummy enters France, the French government greets it with full military honors. A head of state, 3,000 years dead, still given the ceremony of kings. His face, the strong jaw, the high brow, the long nose, matches perfectly the colossal statues he left behind. He looked exactly like he wanted you to believe he looked. Even in death, the image was controlled. Even in death, the story was his, across the ancient world. Pharaoh after pharaoh took the name Ramesses, 9 of them. A tribute so overwhelming it became a title, not just a name. Percy Shelley wrote a poem about his fallen statue, Ozymandias, meant to be a warning about the hubris of power, about how empires crumble, about how nothing lasts. But here is the truth that the poem never admits. We still know his name, we are still saying it.